Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving. If you're listening to this on Turkey Day, number one, I appreciate you. You're probably sitting there with your coffee, with your maybe mimosa if you're listening to a replay, but maybe getting your day started with us if you're listening live right now and enjoying some peace and quiet before the family gets going. Maybe you even have some turkeys already starting their process of being cooked and ready to roll for this incredible day of football, family, and thankfulness. And I'm filled with gratitude for you guys who listen to our show. So did want to get you guys a Turkey Day edition where we preview week 14, the final week of the regular season in college football. And for the ACC, a slew of rivalry games and also some critical games in the ACC Championship race. We did preview Georgia Tech on the Wednesday show, and I'm very lucky to say we're going to have Roddy Jones of the ACC Network join us here in just a little bit. So tune in for that and stay tuned in. We appreciate you guys listening to us. If you guys are watching us on our YouTube channel, All Access AM, thank you guys. We really appreciate your support of All Access AM. And please, if you haven't hit the subscribe button to that All Access AM YouTube page, Google it if you're not watching on there, but definitely hit that subscribe button to make sure it helps us out, make sure we can keep growing this show and bringing you this ACC coverage that have gotten a lot of texts about, just relatively, we're still growing, but have gotten a lot of texts about just saying how much they're kind of enjoying that direction of the show and where it's going. So if you have feedback, drop it in the comments, drop it on our YouTube channel page, and we will consider it and take it into account because we want you guys to enjoy this. We want it to be super interactive. Normally in the comments, this is a pre-recorded episode. Roddy Jones joined me Wednesday afternoon, and we chopped it up right before it got time for family and football and all those things to commence. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 football games to preview on this episode. And we have Roddy Jones to join us. So I hope this is something for you guys to enjoy again, kicking off your day. This is All Access AM. We really appreciate you guys for coming in here Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 to 8 a.m. Central, 8 to 9 Eastern live and making this a fun show for us. And we appreciate our friends at Horn Legend for sponsoring the Thursday show, and a huge deal for you guys that you got to take advantage of. It is their Black Friday deal, 20% off, 2 items or more. And if you get to that magic number 5, you get 30% off their gear. And let me tell you, that is a perfect way to take care of your Christmas shopping. You can also get free shipping when you use code PONY. So fantastic opportunity for you guys to check out our friends at Horn Legend. They make some really, really good stuff. I've worn some of it for you guys. I actually just ordered the sports shirts that they do, the button downs. And I got 2 different kinds. I got the traditional button down collar, and I also got their hidden button collar. So I'm excited to break these out at some family gatherings when they come in and really get a feel for their performance sports shirts as well, because I am always in kind of polos normally with my job, not necessarily in a ton of button downs for the most part, unless we've got a really nice event to go to. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to expand with the Black Friday deal. And I went in on the sports shirts there with our friends at Horn Legend. So we appreciate them for sponsoring the show. Go to hornlegend.com to visit and browse their entire selection. They also have great women's stuff too. They do present our Thursday show, which is just crowded with things to talk about as we get on with our Thanksgiving Day edition of the show. Let's lead off, and I like to do this chronologically over the course of a game day for the most part. I mean, barring a top 10 type of matchup and huge implications between 2 teams facing off against each other. And the biggest thing we have this weekend is Miami at Pitt, which is the leadoff game. It's the top of the list because it is at 11 a.m. Central on ABC. It is up in Pittsburgh, and the Panthers are looking to stay in the race for the ACC Championship, as is Miami. And Miami is, of course, a topic of discussion over the course of this college football rankings debate that is ongoing with Miami and Notre Dame. Miami sits at 12, Notre Dame at number 9. A huge discrepancy between the two teams, despite Miami holding that head-to-head win over them. And when you get up to Pittsburgh for Saturday for this game, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be partly cloudy. It's going to be nice skies, but it's going to be a high of 34 degrees. And maybe, who knows, with Pittsburgh this time of year, maybe a little bit of precipitation, but not much expected in the area, as the Pitt Panthers hope to show up in a big way, in a much better fashion than they did the last time they were on their home turf when they got blown out by Notre Dame. But here's what I know. I know that Miami's defensive line is going to show up. They're going to have their hands full with this Pittsburgh offense, but Miami's defensive line is going to make it very difficult for guys like Jakirian Turner and Desmond Reed and others to get going for this Pitt offense. I am really torn on what way to go with this game and this prediction, but I think I look at Miami and what they've been able to do over these last, couple of weeks here, getting back on the right side of things following losses to Louisville and SMU. They go into this one on the road as 6.5-point favorites, according to BetMGM. The total set at 50.5. Pat Narduzzi said ahead of that Notre Dame game, he said he doesn't really care how things go against Notre Dame as long as they win the next two. Well, here's your opportunity to go 2 for 2 on what you talked about, Pat Narduzzi. You've got a chance to obviously knock Miami out of any sort of discussion around the college football playoff, which for the ACC would kind of be par for the course. But at the same time, Miami has been playing at a very high level, taking no prisoners type of gameplay from the Hurricanes since they've lost those two games in a sense. And I just am really torn on how the cold weather is going to impact Miami. Carson Beck, he's not somebody who is necessarily, I think, prone to being overly impacted by a cold weather atmosphere. But at the same time, I mean, this is Pitt Panther type of weather through and through. They'll have their home crowd behind them. They'll have obviously a lot of people around the country watching this game to see how they respond to the success that they had against Georgia Tech down in Atlanta last week. Now, Georgia Tech, they'll have already played on Friday. How will Georgia Tech respond? That'll be something that we watch as well. We did pick Georgia to win that game. We did not pick them to cover. We just think it's going to be a little bit closer in that good old-fashioned hate rivalry game that they'll have in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This Pitt-Miami game, I think, is going to be chippy. I think Pitt's going to bring it from a just kind of physical nastiness perspective. And they're going to take on that I would say attitude of Mason Heinchel, who went into that game against Georgia Tech. Everybody's talking about Haynes King. We talked about on the show on Monday how Haynes King had the Heisman Trophy shirt that was sent to College Game Day. I would imagine somebody sent that to Mason Heinchel. I would imagine Mason Heinchel and this Pitt Panther team still has motivation left in the tank to say, you know what? Everybody's talking about Miami. Everybody's talking about how they won the head-to-head against Notre Dame and they should be in the college football playoff or this or that, or they're complaining about whatever. Let's shut that down and show that these talking heads around Notre Dame and Miami, well, guess what? We can show that this is a really complicated season, a really complicated world that we live in. We can go out and beat Miami and show that we've got the head-to-head over Miami. And even though we wouldn't have the head-to-head over Notre Dame, we'd be in that conversation of having a really good team and a really good program that should ride into the 2026 season with a ton of momentum. SMU and Virginia, obviously, we'll talk about them later. The two teams that control their own destiny. There's nothing that Pitt can do other than win this football game at 11 a.m. and then sit back the rest of the day and see if any more chaos ensues from this ACC championship race that we've seen so much of. We've seen a lot of this chaos. And for Pitt to win this game, Mason Heinchel is going to have to be ready to go from the get-go. He's going to have to elude pass rushers like Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. He's going to have to get Jakirian Turner involved. He's going to have a lot on his plate as far as managing this front four of Miami and this entire Miami defense that, for the most part has really been able to take care of business on a just overall season perspective. Like even those games against Louisville and SMU, it wasn't an overly overwhelmed Miami defense that caused those games to be lost. Carson Beck throws a bunch of interceptions against Louisville. SMU able to capitalize on some mistakes from Miami in that game and make enough plays to hang around, and then get the win in overtime and overcome some of their own mistakes too. But Miami does have Carson Beck and this offense that with Mark Fletcher back, they can be built for this cold weather game. The question I have is, can Miami run the football on Pitt's run defense? That is going to be the question. I think it deserves to be answered in this game rather than be assumed that they're going to just be able to run all over Pitt. Carson Beck is somebody that when you're forcing him to go out and win the game and do all of these things, I just don't think that's his game. I don't think that's what Miami wants from him. And so it is worth talking about when it comes to how Miami is going to be able to run the ball and be able to be efficient and do all of the things offensively that they like to do by getting guys like CJ Daniels and Malachi Toney involved. Well, if Mark Fletcher and Gerald Pringle aren't able to get going in this game, that is going to be an issue. Georgia Tech had 121 yards on the ground against them, but 76 of it came from Haynes King. Georgia Tech was not really able to get much going as far as Jay Haynes getting going. He was held to 3.9 yards per carry on 10 carries for 39 yards. They fell behind early, but that Pitt defensive line was still able to kind of impose their will on them and stop that from the get-go. That is what Miami is going to have to solve in this game. This is the biggest game of the day as far as ranked teams go, and it is a statement opportunity for both teams. It's a statement opportunity for Miami. Can you go out and style point the hell out of it and show the committee, hey, look what we just did to Pittsburgh. Look at what Notre Dame did, and Notre Dame won handedly. But can Miami win at a bigger clip than Notre Dame did over Pittsburgh? That would be a talking point. And I think going into the final week of the regular season, could the committee make a drastic change if Miami goes out and dominates Pitt? That is a question that I have, at least with regards to the college football playoff race. When you look at Pittsburgh, they have a chance to obviously punch their ticket into the offseason and into bowl season as one of the hottest teams in the ACC, a team that should be talked about as being in Charlotte potentially for the 2026 season going into next season. And they have a chance that if they win this game and chaos ensues and a team like Virginia Tech beats Virginia or Cal beats SMU, they could find their way into the ACC Championship game in Charlotte. So all things on the table for both teams. Both teams obviously want to get a win, want to ride high into this potential week of chaos in the ACC that we always talk about. So whoever wins this game, it will be paramount that if they get into the ACC Championship game in some world or fashion, that they step up to the plate and really have a good showing in that game for the league no matter what. So lots to play for in that 11 a.m. game. It's a league game. It's not one of these ACC-SEC rivalries. It is a very, very important game in the college football playoff race. Speaking of important things, I want to make sure you guys are well hydrated during this Thanksgiving weekend as these games really get going. And you don't always have to have a beer or have some red wine. You can have some tequila, and our friends at Socorro are there for you as well. Get free shipping when you order 3 bottles or more at SocorroTequila.com. That's Socorro, SOCORRO, tequila.com. And it is fantastic. It is an award-winning tequila that we're proud to partner with, and they have won awards all over the country and globe now. They're getting the recognition they deserve, and they're the official tequila of American Airlines. So make sure you check them out, SocorroTequila.com. And as far as making a prediction on this game, obviously Miami favored by 6.5 here. I've got a decision to make in this one. I really, really like what Pitt is doing. At the same time, I am very high on Miami's roster. This might be a little bit of wish casting that you'd like to see Miami win this game for the ACC. Kind of a, hey, we've been stumping for ourselves for the entire season with wins over Notre Dame and some of their non-conference foes that they faced. If you lose this game, you kind of show that, okay, you started hot and then you kind of did what Miami has done in the past, which is just not finish well. And that is where you'll see next year, if Miami starts off hot again, you're going to see the committee do what they did this year and have them stuck a little bit farther back in those first rankings, like you saw after they lost Louisville. There was no benefit of the doubt. And so if Miami can win this game and show that, hey, they had a bad day from Carson Beck, they ran into a tough opponent in SMU that's done really, really well under Rhett Lashley and is back to playing for a championship. They figured themselves out in conference play, or they have an opportunity to play for a championship if they win Saturday night. Then you can kind of create this talking point of, look, it's hard to win every single ACC game. We're still a really good team. Look at our resume, blah, blah, blah. So those are all, I think, things to keep in mind when you look at this Miami-Pittsburgh matchup. I am inclined to say that Miami wins this football game. I don't trust it. I don't love it. It is going to be cold up there. Mason Heinchel, I am so high on him, if you guys can't tell from watching this show. But I just think Miami is putting the gas pedal down a little bit. And I know I say that after Pitt went down and beat the brakes off of Georgia Tech. I think that was a perfect storm of bad Georgia Tech defense and Mason Heinchel being who I thought he was. I think it's going to be just a little bit more tough sledding this week against this Miami defense. Miami in a squeaker, like relatively low scoring. I could see it being like 24-22, something weird like that. But it wouldn't shock me if Mason Heinchel announced himself to the world and really showed that Notre Dame game wasn't, an indicator of him finally facing a tougher test. But I think Miami wins this one, and they, can continue to show that they are one of the best teams and rosters in this country and one of the best resumes in this country. So we'll see how that goes. 11 a.m. ABC up in Pittsburgh. Really excited to watch that one. One I am not excited to watch, in a sense, Kentucky at Louisville. 11 a.m. on ACC Network. Obviously, Louisville at home here. Kentucky, though, has been a team that until last week against Vanderbilt, they really had been able to, I think, kind of play like halfway spoiler. They hadn't really ever gotten anything through as far as the wins coming. Like, you think about that Texas game, they weren't able to get a touchdown at the goal line. Texas wins it on a field goal. Man, could you imagine if that game went in a different way? Ugh, brutal for Kentucky. But Louisville sits as 3-point favorites in this one. I don't want to spend too much time on it, in a sense. Louisville is so beat up. I don't know how to pick this one. I don't know what Louisville team is going to show up. It is really, really, really brutal if you're Louisville, staring down the potential of losing out your final 4 games of the year, and going from a team that was so close to the college football playoff to sitting here at 7-4, entering this weekend with your rival on deck. And if you lose this one, you've lost 4 straight. Really, ever since they beat Miami, they don't look like the same team. Obviously, Isaac Brown being hurt affected that, and they didn't have Kewan Brown last week against SMU. Miller Moss was out. I have not seen if he's expected to play or not yet. Obviously, we're recording this Wednesday evening, so I hadn't gotten a chance to see that. But I think if he is able to go, that is something that would be a positive. But I think also Louisville wants to see what they have in Deuce Adams. I was, despite him only throwing for something like 95, 100 yards against SMU, I kind of liked what he was able to do. He got the ball out of his hands quick. They hit a couple of explosives, but really SMU was just kind of all over him last week. If Louisville has any sort of run game in this one, watch them to be able to control this one and beat Kentucky at its own game. I don't love this one. I honestly would not take Louisville to cover in this. I would take Kentucky. because I just don't trust it. If I had to pick it, I would say Kentucky covers. Louisville maybe finds a way to win here and just ekes out a finish to the season that Jeff Brom could be proud of. This is at home. This is a huge game. It's a huge game for Jeff Brom, as he and Louisville have been in discussions around a new contract. So if they're going to continue with Jeff Brom as their coach, they need to win games like this. And the ACC needs to win games like this against the SEC. Louisville can help the ACC in a big way Saturday at 11 a.m. on ACC Network. We go with Clemson at South Carolina. This is where things get dicey here. South Carolina coming off of a game recently that they really made it difficult on Texas A&M, jumped out to that big lead. Shane Beamer's waving the mission accomplished flag. Last week they got to play Coastal Carolina, so congrats to South Carolina on that. Clemson played Furman. This is a huge rivalry game. Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers look a little bit better than they have in the early part of the season. They've kind of found their footing. They've won 3 straight, albeit they played Florida State. They eked out a win against Louisville, where Louisville missed extra points, field goals, things like that. And they beat Furman. Again, huge opportunity for Dabo Swinney, for Clemson to show that they are going to find a way to get things on track, that they are going into the offseason hot, that they can kind of be proud of the way they battle back in this overall world that they're in, and the bed that they've made in this season, and how they didn't really get it done early on. And when you look at what they can bring to the table as far as, win for the ACC, this is a bad South Carolina team. Lenore Sellers in this South Carolina offense has just not been good. So if you can go into this game and they're 2.5-point dogs and win outright, that is going to calm a lot of things down. I'm going to go Clemson here to win outright. I think Dabo Swinney is going to get the most out of that defensive line this week that we have kind of been hoping that they would get out of them. Nick Harbor is going to be a really tough matchup for this Clemson secondary that's been kind of up and down at times, to say the least. But Cade Klubnik, if they can protect him, and I know they're banged up a little bit on the offensive line now, but if they can protect him just enough, get some of these gazelles that they have at receiver going, and I know they have some injuries there too, this would be a massive win. This would be a huge win for Clemson to go into the offseason and do it. That's witch casting. Do I think they do it? I do. I just think South Carolina is in bad shape. Maybe them taking care of business against Coastal 51-7 kind of clears the palate a little bit and allows them to come out and play a little bit loose now that they've settled down. After that, they've tasted the winning. Maybe they can do all of that. I just think Cade Klubnik's going to find a way. I think Lenore Sellers, I know there's some rumors. I don't want to get into that. But if he is remotely checked out or not as focused on the eye on the prize kind of situation, that could play into Clemson's hand. He could be making some, kind of business decisions, getting rid of the ball quicker and things like that if Clemson's defensive line can get after him. So keep an eye on that. I'm taking Clemson on the SEC Network to not only cover their 2.5-point dogs, but win outright in Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia. Huge game for Clemson, and honestly, huge game for people like Garrett Riley. Huge game for Tom Allen to kind of build some confidence in that defense, maybe, despite South Carolina being down. A momentum opportunity for Clemson here. Boston College at Syracuse, 2:00 Central on the CW. Boy, I don't even want to talk about this game. I really don't, but I will give you guys a pick. Boston College is one of the worst teams in the entire country in all of Power 4 this season. They really haven't been able to do anything outside of take Georgia Tech to the absolute brink here. And at the same time, Syracuse, ever since losing Steve Angeli, has been one of the worst, if not the worst team in the ACC. In terms of my power rankings, I would have Syracuse at the bottom right now. I moved them down 1 to the bottom last week. Syracuse, 3-point dogs in this one. It is at Syracuse. I actually think that kind of helps Boston College. It might be a little cavernous dungeon up there at the JMA Wireless Dome up in Syracuse. But I'm going to take Boston College. I'm going to take them to win, to cover all of the things. BC gets the check mark there to get it done. Don't even want to talk about how the matchup really works there. I have zero doubt in my mind going into it that Syracuse's offense is going to be able to do anything against this Boston College defense. I just don't see it. On the flip side, we have a really intriguing matchup between Wake Forest at Duke. 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ACC Network. This is a game with big implications. Duke wins, and Duke is still in the ACC Championship race with actually not a ton of unbelievable things needing to happen for them to go to Charlotte, which would be a doomsday scenario for the ACC. Here's what I think. I've said this about Duke. I think they are average. I think they are, you could argue, that they are Wake Forest level of a team, but they have kind of not benefited from a schedule like Wake Forest has this year. If you look at Wake Forest's schedule as they go into this final game of the regular season, they're sitting at 8-3. They have an opportunity to finish 9-3. And you look at their schedule and they've not really played anyone in non-conference at all. So they've gotten their 4 wins out of the way in that non-conference slate. They've lost to NC State, which all of the teams above 500, it seems like, have. Georgia Tech, and they should have won that game. They should be entering this game 9-2. And then at Florida State, and kind of almost an anomaly for this Jake Dickert team, who's played everyone well or close in losses for the most part. So I look at this game, and I really think that Duke has shown us a lot about who they are. And it's not even an attitude type of thing. It's not even a Duke's bad program or whatever. I just think Duke has made some personnel decisions that have put themselves in a situation where they're just not in a position to compete for championships and to compete at a high level with these other teams in the ACC. And we've seen that. And we've seen Duke, their only really impressive win was beating Clemson. That was kind of a crazy one. And that's it. You look at the rest of their wins, Cal, Syracuse, NC State, North Carolina, and that was a dogfight. Duke has not been that impressive. Wake Forest is a product of their schedule, in my opinion. They've beat an SMU team that absolutely did not get off the bus offensively. Kind of crazy, kind of wild. Virginia did not have Chandler Morris for much of that game. Wake's defense was able to capitalize on a lot of things put in front of them this year. And the one team, or the 2 teams that have offensive firepower, or I should say 2 of the 3 teams that have offensive firepower on their schedule, NC State and Georgia Tech and SMU, 2 of those 3 were able to put up points and get things rolling. And then obviously Florida State with the blowout. So this is a Duke team that has some offensive firepower. I just don't think there's enough consistency from Darian Mensah and this group to score enough points to kind of beat out this Wake Forest defense, if that makes sense. I think this is going to be an ugly football game. I think this is a 20-17 type of win, and I'm going to go with the Demon Deacons to get to 9-3. They're 1.5 point underdogs going into this one, and the total is set for 55.5. I just think it's going to be lower. I don't know why. I just don't trust this Duke team, and I'm going to go with Wake to get a statement win and finally kind of eliminate Duke from the ACC Championship race once and for all. Jake Dickert is going to get my ACC Coach of the Year vote in all likelihood, and it would really be cemented if he wins this game and they win this game this weekend at Duke. I'm going to be watching that one really closely. I have got Wake Forest outright, and they're 1.5 point dogs there. Florida State at Florida. I don't know if Florida State is going to be able to help the ACC like so many people would love them to. Mike Norvell was announced that he was going to be retained. Florida enters this game as 1.5 point favorites. On a neutral field, they'd be dogs, which I think is interesting. I haven't watched a ton of Florida this year. I've watched a good bit of Florida State. I like Tommy Castellanos, his ability to run, extend things, kind of make some magic happen in what'll be a rivalry game. 3:30 p.m. Central Time on ESPN2. I am beyond torn on this one. My gut tells me that we see Mike Norvell's Noles show up and play hard, but at the same time, I don't know if they're going to be good enough to get this one across the finish line for a win to kind of end their season on a high note. And that's unfortunate. I just think that's how it's going to play out. I'm going to go with Florida to win and cover here. I think like a 4-point win for the Gators is kind of where my head is at. And it'd be really unfortunate for Mike Norvell because, again, I'm kind of in his corner. I actually wore the Central Arkansas hat. My wife went there. So I was kind of like trying to, show a little of, not support for Mike Norvell as he got announced he was returning. But, these rivalry games, when your season is done, it's really hard to predict which way these are going to go in a sense, when Florida State just hasn't given me enough reason against teams like a Clemson or some of these other ones out there as they've gone through this year to make me say, okay, I can see where this is going to go. I can see Florida State stepping up and defending the ACC here. I think the ACC goes 2-2 in these rivalry games. Yeah, I think that's what I see coming from these ACC SEC rivalry games that are upon us. I think Florida State's going to drop this one though. I just don't think they have enough juice to beat the Gators. I think that's a really good roster in Gainesville. Virginia Tech, Virginia. Here's a big one. 6 p.m. Massive implications for the ACC Championship and what is going on there. We are going to be locked in on this one without a doubt as we see this game getting closer and closer to coming to game time here in the coming days. And when you look at what Virginia Tech is facing, they're 9.5-point underdogs, but they've also won every game in the 2000s except for 2 against Virginia. This game on ESPN in Charlottesville, I really don't trust Virginia. First of all, I think Virginia Tech covers. I am not ready to pick Virginia to outright lose, but this is absolutely going to be a dogfight. It would not shock me if Virginia Tech won this game. But what I wanted to see against Miami was a team that came out hot and really started and played a game that was competitive all the way through. Miami was able to coast past Virginia Tech because they weren't ready to play. I just don't think there's enough talent currently in Blacksburg to make that happen. And so for those reasons, I think Virginia is going to be able to come out and be ready to play enough so that they can kind of play from ahead and dictate the terms. I still think we're going to be seeing this one, go the way of Virginia in the end, and they will punch their ticket to the ACC Championship. And truthfully, for the ACC's sake, I think a lot of people should be hoping for very little drama on this weekend. It's been a drama-filled season. It's been up and down as far as who's been in, who's been out, etc. But if Virginia wins, if SMU wins, it seems like at this point that would be kind of best case scenario for this league, just to kind of get those two teams in, let them play it out. Then you're putting somebody in the college football playoff, and you hope that Miami could either end up in the conference championship game, maybe in some way, or they just end up in the college football playoff with an opportunity to get in just by beating the brakes off of Pitt. Maybe they get moved up above Alabama for some reason or something. But we'll see how that all plays out. I think Virginia Tech just doesn't have the talent. I think UVA's going to kind of smell the blood in the water. I think Chandler Morris is going to kind of will them to that win. 6 p.m. ESPN. Virginia Tech covers, UVA wins. North Carolina at NC State. This is an interesting one that if North Carolina wins this one, it would not shock me if Dave Dorian was not retained. I don't really care what has happened with wins over Georgia Tech or wins over FSU and how crazy that was. North Carolina is a 7.5-point underdog. NC State's at home, and the Wolfpack, I think, are a team that talent-wise should race away from North Carolina. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think NC State, and I've been high on what North Carolina is doing as of late. I've been high on kind of how they're piecing it together late this season. So this kind of goes a little bit against what I've kind of thought about North Carolina as of late. They played Duke really tough, but before that, they were really playing some solid football. I think NC State can figure it out enough to cover in this one. This is a big number for me, kind of thinking about this as a rivalry game perspective. I know it's not UNC Duke, but you do have an NC State team that I think has an opportunity to to do this. I really do. And we've seen them when they play Georgia Tech, what they can do offensively when they're on, again, bad defense, whatever. But North Carolina is a little too inconsistent, and they are not necessarily high flying enough offensively, I think, to keep up with NC State. I think this one's like a 30-20, 30-21 type of win for NC State. And they roll in with a little bit of confidence, kind of the way they played down the stretch. If Dave Dorian loses this one, though, it would not shock me if he did not return in Raleigh. So keep an eye on that. And that's just kind of a interesting take. 6:30 p.m. Central Time on ACC Network. We go out to the West Coast for the final two games of the slate. One being one that is a crazy matchup to talk about, just from the perspective of the overall, I think, spread of it, with Notre Dame taking on Stanford. But then there's SMU Cal, and that is a massive game for SMU, obviously, with a chance to punch its ticket to the ACC Championship. Cal did fire its coach, Justin Wilcox, and that is the first game we'll talk about. It is a 7 p.m. game on ESPN2. Be a nice 5 p.m. kickoff out there in California. SMU has jumped out to a 13.5 point favorite in this one. I like that number. I do think SMU is starting to play its best football. Kevin Jennings in this offense, I think, has really become, kind of bordering on juggernaut status, and kind of what they're able to do, day in, day out, as of late, just their efficiency, and they're getting a little bit of confidence in the run game. I see them hitting that kind of 38, point mark, and really kind of putting up some points, a little bit of a muscle flex on what is a good Cal defense. I just think SMU's defense is going to be able to take care of business against Sagapitelli in that Cal offense, and keep everything in front of them, kind of keep it as dink and dunk, and then get after him and really affect Sagapitelli. I think this could be one of his toughest days, as far as how he's maybe knocked around and things like that. So I'm going to pick SMU 13.5 point favorites. I'm going to pick him to cover. Big number on the road, senior night at Cal. Nick Rolovich, I like the way he handled his press conference this week. I just think too much SMU, and maybe they're a team that gets to Charlotte with a win out there at Cal, and can then go to the college football playoff with a win against a UVA, and maybe avenge kind of how their last season ended, with losses to Clemson and Penn State. So it is starting to feel a little different around SMU. They feel like there's a different confidence. Last year it was kind of like happy-go-lucky, here we are. This year it seems a little, and this is going to come off a little weird, but a little bit more business-like. Like, oh, we've done this. This is how it's supposed to happen for us. Now we've earned it. We're back here. We're doing this, and we're going to go out and kind of take what's ours. So I don't expect SMU to mess around in this game, but I do expect Cal to play hard. I think SMU pulls away, though, in like a 38-10 type of game, 38-17, and gets the win. Finally, Notre Dame taking on Stanford on the farm. Andrew Luck bobblehead night, 32.5 points of this one. I'm just going to take Notre Dame to cover. I think what Stanford did last week against Cal was awesome for that program, for all the work they've put in. But I think this is a 40-10 win for Notre Dame. They're efficient. They can grind it out. I think they're going to run the football. It wouldn't shock me if there were 8 to 10 possessions for each team in this ball game that are spread out over the course of these 4 quarters. And we see this be a ball control style attack from both sides. Notre Dame, though, they are really playing some good ball. I think they win 40-10, something along that lines. And I guess that would be a Stanford cover as well. But so I'm a little off there. But Notre Dame's playing some of their best football right now. And it's a product of the schedule. Don't get me wrong. What they did to Pitt was very impressive, though. And so don't doubt them to put up a big number on Stanford this weekend, as Stanford looks to close out senior night with a shock, with some craziness going on, but I just don't see it happening. So with that, guys, we are going to get to our interview with ACC Network analyst Roddy Jones. He's going to join us in just a second. But first, I do want to remind you about our friends at Sports Mode. Check out the Sports Mode app today and see what you are missing on that front, where you can support your favorite college football team. with donations that are micro donations. You can have those, little impacts bit by bit on your favorite program. And that is the great thing about Sportsmo. When you download it, it's tax deductible donations. So download the Sportsmo app at sportsmo.org today. Jump all over that and let us know what you think. Share your favorite bet to make on your team in our comment section. So we'll check them out and we'll chat about them a little bit more. So hope you guys enjoyed our preview portion, but now we'll get to Roddy Jones and chat with him a little bit about this weekend, this ACC Championship race, and all of those things. And one final reminder, check out our friends at Horn Legend. Get free shipping when you use code PONY, and their Black Friday sale, 20% off 2 items or more, 30% off 5 items or more. Check them out today, hornlegend.com. Without any further ado, let's go to ACC Network analyst Roddy Jones. Now, really excited to be joined on All Access AM for his All Access AM debut. That's Roddy Jones of the ACC Network and ESPN. Roddy, thanks so much for jumping on with us around the holidays. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Billy. Anytime for you.
Well, we have a big weekend in the ACC with ACC Championship week just around the corner, and SMU, Virginia sitting there with the opportunity to control their own destiny, get to Charlotte. Obviously, we'll talk about your Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets there in just a minute. But going into this weekend, do you expect chaos, or do you expect things to kind of go as maybe now they're finally planned out for the ACC?
It'd be very un-ACC if they went as planned, and also very un-college football. You look at the rivalries across the country and the nature of those games and how difficult it is to win rivalry games. I think we're going to see some shakeups. It's difficult to predict exactly where they'll be, but I think to assume that it's going to be a straightforward weekend is probably a little naive. And I do think SMU is a team that is rounding into form, playing the right way, and maybe Cal gets that interim bounce that we see from time to time. But overall, I think SMU is going to be okay. I think the chaos happens elsewhere, but I do think there's going to be some chaos.
As we look to this Saturday, is there a game that you're most excited about watching unfold and getting the answers that we're all looking forward to? You've got Miami Pitt. You've obviously got Virginia Tech, Virginia. You've got Georgia Tech, Georgia kicking off the weekend for the ACC. SMU taking on Cal in that late night one. Those are kind of the ones that really stand out as far as implications go and big game mentality. Are there any that catch your eye in particular this week?
I think nationwide, it's Texas and Texas A&M, especially because that Texas team has not always, that Texas A&M team has not played the cream of the crop in the SEC. Right. And the Texas A&M team has not always played great on the road this year. I saw them on the road at Arkansas, and Taylon Green had a field day. So I think they figured some of that stuff out, but I do want to see them against some better competitions. First time we've seen them against a team that good in a long time. In the ACC, I think the one that I'm looking forward to most is Miami Pitt, because if Miami's going to continue this climb up the rankings, they're going to have to look against Pitt like Notre Dame did, because now we've got the two common opponents. You've got the Syracuse data point, which Notre Dame, golly, they need to be charged with something criminally for what they did to Syracuse. And you've got the NC State data point of the common opponent, along with obviously the head-to-head, which is some people's guiding principle. But these comparison points late in the year, I think, are also important. Miami looked great against NC State, better than Notre Dame did. I don't know that anybody in the country would have looked better against Syracuse than Notre Dame did. And so this Pitt game is pretty crucial. And I do think it's an interesting setup for Miami. Pitt's coming off of obviously a win over Georgia Tech. They're feeling good about themselves. They've been gearing themselves up for these games, these two ACC games to finish the year, especially according to Pat Narduzzi. He said these two games are the ones that mattered. Well, they took care of Georgia Tech. Now can they take care of Miami in what is supposed to be a pretty chilly Pittsburgh on Saturday?
You mentioned Pat Narduzzi saying, look, I don't really care what happens against Notre Dame as long as he wins the next one. Check, that box off the list for him last week against Georgia Tech. We'll get to that game in just a minute with Georgia Tech, because I do want to get your take on the Yellow Jackets. But Miami Pitt, do you see this one being as a hard fought ACC game because man, Mason Heinschel just is really, really impressed. But at the same time, Miami is playing at least against these teams that, as of late, they've been dealt. They've taken care of business. They are kind of making those statements to the College Football Playoff Committee. This is their last chance to say, "See, we should be considered alongside Notre Dame."
Yeah, I think this is going to go one of two ways. If Pitt can get out to a fast start and take Miami out of their game of wanting to run the football and control the clock, then I think Pitt's got a shot. They're also going to have to protect Mason Heinschel and probably create some turnovers. That was the recipe against Georgia Tech. Fast start. They protected Mason Heinschel at the beginning of the game, and then Georgia Tech's pressure started to get to him. And they took Georgia Tech a little bit out of their game and forced Haynes King into mistakes where they were able to obviously create turnovers, and one of them a pick six in a crucial play. So I think that's sort of the blueprint against a Miami team that's better than Georgia Tech, particularly on the defensive line. And that is my biggest concern for Pitt is can they protect Mason Heinschel? That defensive line for Georgia Tech was able to pressure him pretty consistently. Miami's defensive line is in another stratosphere from what Georgia Tech's is. And they've got excellent blitzers like Jacoby Thomas from the secondary, who slides into that nickel spot. Keontae Scott often or was man for the beginning part of the season until he got hurt. So I do think they have a myriad of different ways that they can create pressure. And Mason Heinschel is going to have to figure that out. And they also do it with really good people up front. Akeem Mesidor, Ruben Bain, Ahmad Moten, David Blay, Justin Scott, like those guys are really, really talented there in the middle. So it's going to be a tall task for Pitt. And I do think they're going to have some things go their way. But we've seen Miami kind of play with their food. If you can create or if you can prevent the big plays that Miami, likes to get but hasn't always gotten, then I think Pitt, again, will have a shot.
I think Miami watching that team, my biggest question is, can they force Carson back into some turnovers? Can they get him off his game in that cold weather environment? That's going to be really something to see as we watch Miami go up there into that cold weather and see if they can kind of play that style of game that they're going to need to against Pitt, where Pitt isn't able to capitalize on turnovers and jump out to a fast start and do all of those things, because that was that recipe against Georgia Tech. And it really, with Carson Beck, we've seen that a little bit against Louisville, and that game stands out. But man, this is a game where Miami's going to have to run the football and really establish themselves early.
Yeah, I should have. You just kind of jogged my thought process on this. I should have looked to see if Carson Beck has played in a cold weather game before, and I don't know what the high is in Pittsburgh on 30, Saturday.
30-ish.
Yeah. So at kickoff at noon, it's going to be in the 20s probably. And at Georgia, the furthest north he would have gone while he's there is if they played at Kentucky. And I don't know that they did. Missouri gets cold. I don't know that they were at Missouri late in the season. Tennessee could be chilly, but there's not a lot of obvious places where he would have played in a cold weather game. And he's not a guy that throws the ball well in the rain. And right. So it does beg the question, like, is it all the elements? Is it just the wet? What is the factor that throws him off the most? So it's a good question, man. It's a good question.
I am kind of like jogging down his career game log here, and maybe Tennessee, middle of November on the road. He went.
It could have been chilly. It could have been
chilly. Could have been nice.
It could have been nice. It could have been 60. It could have been 35. It probably wasn't 35.
So I don't know. But honestly, looking at it, probably the coldest game just off the jump might have been that last week's game at Virginia Tech, truthfully. So that's something we're going to see with Carson Beck. Who knows? Maybe he starts getting into the gloves. Who knows with how he'll handle that environment at Pitt. I know the Panthers, I think, will be ready to go for that one, though, to try and keep themselves in the ACC Championship race, which they did by beating Georgia Tech last week. What do you make of how Georgia Tech bounces back this week? Can they come out and deliver the type of a game that we saw last year, an instant classic, and maybe even shock the world and get over the hump against Georgia?
I don't know, Billy, and I want to have faith in my Jackets. I really do. But as an analyst, these are two teams that are kind of going different ways in terms of what their season has been towards the end of the year. Georgia is rounding into form. Their defense has started to create penetration and pressure. Offensively, they've been able to run the ball for the vast majority of the season. They're finding more production out of Noah Thomas. Zachariah Branch has been excellent for him, and they've really leaned on those tight ends led by Lawson Lucky. And Gunnar Stockton is probably the most underrated quarterback of a college football playoff team that there is. Whereas you look at Georgia Tech, and that defense has really shown some cracks. Teams, Boston College, NC State, Pitt have really moved the ball on them. Even go back to the Duke game, as I pointed out, back in the middle of the year, like that was kind of signs that Georgia Tech defense was struggling. So I see these as two teams in very different places. The hope is that it's a rivalry game, and that aspect of it propels Georgia Tech to play at a higher level. Because you compare it to that game last year, I thought Georgia Tech was playing better towards the end of last season than they are this season, at least in terms of where they started or where they had been for most of the season. And Georgia was sort of fading towards the end. Yes, they were able to get over the hump in the SEC Championship game, but that was ugly, man. It was an ugly slugfest against Texas, and it was mainly led by the defense. So I think this is a much more complete Georgia team. I think this is probably Kirby's best Georgia team in a few seasons. But you just hope that Georgia Tech in a neutral site, which I will say neutral site, even when Georgia Tech plays at home, that thing is like 50-50, maybe 60-40 Georgia Tech to Georgia fans in Bobby Dodd Stadium. You put that thing in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and I have a feeling, the Georgia fans are going to outnumber the Tech fans in what is supposed to be a Tech home game. But it'll be mostly a neutral site. It's going to feel a little sterile because of where it is. But maybe that gets Georgia Tech going with the lights on the brightest and in the big pro stadium.
Georgia fans can just stay camped out in their same seats if they really want to think ahead for that one as they get ready for the SEC Championship. Maybe there's a look ahead. I don't think so in this rivalry, but you never know with these young men these days.
I hope
going on.
Billy,
I know you're hoping.
I hope there is. But Georgia Tech has beaten Georgia 3 times since the year 2000. They won in 2000 in Athens. And then won in 08, 14, and 16. All of those games were in Athens. Last time they won in Atlanta was 1999. And Georgia Tech has been to a number of SEC championship games, and they have tended not to look ahead. So I hope they're going to look ahead, but history would say that they're going to be ready.
Maybe it's the zip code. Maybe Mercedes-Benz is in a different zip than Bobby
I wish.
Dodd. So I don't know.
It actually might be. I don't know. We'll have to look that up.
Right? Look. You talked about Georgia Tech, and the lopsided nature of it. Virginia Tech, a massive game for ACC Championship implications. Also lopsided. Last win for UVA, I believe, was 2019. Mm-hmm. This is a game that UVA has served up for it. Coaching change in Blacksburg. You got it at home for a reason. You've got everything in front of you. Do they get the job done this week?
It feels like if not now, then when, Billy. I mean, you mentioned the last one was 2019. They've won 1 time in the last 20 tries. They've won 2 times in the last quarter century. So it is a heavily Virginia Tech dominated rivalry. But throughout most of the 2000s, especially the early 2000s, those were some really good teams under Frank Beamer, starting in the late 90s with the Michael Vick teams, through the Marcus Vick teams, through the Tyrod Taylor teams, through the Logan Thomas teams. Those teams were really good. And then, they kind of hit rocky times at a time where Virginia was scuffling. There's never been the disparity in terms of wins between Virginia and Virginia Tech on the Virginia side that there is right now. This is the biggest disparity there's been in wins favoring Virginia since at least the last quarter century and possibly longer than that. So it feels like if not now, then when. The thing is, whenever you have streaks like this, weird things happen in those games. So if Virginia can stop the run, they're going to have a good chance of winning the game because Virginia Tech has struggled to throw it consistently. But you got to get over the hump. And sometimes there's just bad juju in those games. I told you what the record was between Georgia and Georgia Tech. Georgia had won 7 straight before we beat them in 08, but we lost in 9, 10, and 11. And a couple of those times we had a better team in 2010, a much better team. We were probably even with them in 2000. Sorry, that was in 2009. We were probably even with them in 2010. weird things happen for us to lose those 2 games. That stuff does happen, and sometimes it creeps in your mind, and that causes it. But I think for Virginia, it feels like if you can't beat them this year, then when are we ever going to beat them? But that team doesn't have to worry about it. They just got to worry about stopping the run and executing.
Well, it's been such a unique season for Georgia Tech, and a special one for Haynes King. So you would hope that maybe Georgia Tech and the Yellow Jackets could kind of channel their inner, getting over the hump, and also Virginia can channel their inner getting over the hump, and maybe we see a little bit of a changing of the guard in those 2 rivalries. Who knows? But SMU at Cal, they also have that kind of interim coach juju out there. Potentially. And I liked Nick Rolovich's press conference this week, just kind of how he's attacking it. He was very honest. He said, look, this is not something that I'm taking for granted, that I'm sitting in this chair. I also have a lot of respect for Justin Wilcox, and he's a great friend of mine. But, we're all reeling here. I'm trying to take care of the guys and figure out how to win a football game at the end of the day. And that kind of all shucks, we're just in this, trying to take care of these kids mentality. Maybe it hits home with these Cal players who have been through a lot this year after a hot start. But I still think SMU is one of those teams right now that's playing such good football that they kind of smell that blood in the water to get back to Charlotte.
Yeah, SMU is playing well down the stretch. They've gotten better and better over the course of the season, and they're playing well in the right places. At the beginning of the season, remember, we were sort of comparing this defensive line to last year's defensive line and saying, oh, well, it's not as good. That's why they're giving up all the pass yardage that they're giving. They're not getting as much pressure on the quarterback. That has changed. Isaiah Smith has been phenomenal. And even though Cam Robertson has been hurt, I think Isaiah Smith's emergence has been really big for him. And then you look at those 2 big guys in the middle. They have been really good for SMU in terms of stopping the run. Ahmad Moses and Isaiah Wacobia have started to play better. Ahmad Moses has really been one of the best players defensively in the ACC down the stretch. And so I think that defense has started to play better, and especially the defensive front should give Cal fits. And it would be really tough for Cal to pull an upset if SMU's defensive line controls the game the way I think they should, as long as SMU doesn't turn the ball over. The reason you lose that Wake game is not only because of the turnovers. There was also the fact that SMU forgot that they needed to play offense, but the turnovers definitely hurt. And I think without those, SMU probably wins that football game and is in a real great position to get to the ACC Championship. So I like the way SMU is playing. I like Nick Rolovich. He is incredibly engaging. I had him when he was at Hawaii and left just really as a big fan of him. He'd be the coach at Washington State if it wasn't for all the stuff that went down off the field with him. But he is a guy that will have that team ready to play. He'll have some ideas offensively and defensively for things, wrinkles that they can throw at SMU. It's probably a team that's going to play like there's nothing to lose. So SMU needs to be on alert for all the trickery, and any sort of Thanksgiving magic that can happen out on the West Coast.
Roddy, we'll get you out of here on this. Who are your ACC championship teams that are playing next week in Charlotte? Do we have a surprise also, and Miami gets into the college football playoff? Who do you see?
So I think SMU gets to the ACC championship game. I don't know how the tiebreakers work, honestly, after that. So I'm gonna go with, golly, who gets in if Virginia loses and Pitt loses? Because I think those 2 things will happen.
I think it would be Miami.
Would it be Miami? It's Miami or Duke, because I think Duke's gonna win. So I think it's SMU and then somebody. Figure, for the fans listening, you can figure out what that scenario leads to. It's either Miami or Duke. But
Duke gets in with a Pitt loss to Miami, and
you're muted. What was the last part?
Duke gets in with a Pitt loss and an SMU loss.
Okay.
So there's no path, it looks like, for Duke to get in. They need Miami to win.
Yep.
They need a UVA loss, and then and then they're the biggest UNC Tar Heel fans on the face of the planet. So how about that?
There you go.
Which could happen, but that's a big lift right there.
Yeah, that's a weird game. NC State's kind of dominated that rivalry here recently. So I guess it would be SMU Miami would be my pick. We'd get a rematch. Although, I do, I think Virginia is a better team. I just don't think you can pick against 19 of the last 20. So I'll err on the side of history.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be like, seeing all this data and be like, yeah, you know what, Virginia finally going to get it done. But
I know.
we have something here in the SMU area. It's called Highland Park Magic. That's what Chandler Morris might have a little bit of. We'll see.
There you go.
For the Scots, bringing it to UVA. So we'll see how it goes. But we know you'll be on top of it at ACC Network. Thanks so much for your time on a holiday week, and a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, Roddy. We really appreciate it.
Same to you, Billy. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to all your listeners as well.
Thank you. There he goes. Roddy Jones, we appreciate it. Busy man on this week, spending some time with us on All Access AM. We'll catch you guys next week, recapping a crazy weekend of ACC football once again, and we will be with 2 participants in the ACC Championship game by then. We'll break it all down on this Monday edition of All Access AM. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you Monday, 7 a.m. Central Time. I'm Billy Embody. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll catch you guys next time.